The shouting started so suddenly it felt like the air itself had snapped. You could hear it 3 blocks away, raw, furious voices that didn't belong in a quiet, well-manicured neighborhood like ours. People stepped out of their front doors, drawn toward the park by instinct and curiosity. Phones in hand, a crowd began to form around the playground where 2 men stood facing each other in the patchy shade near the jungle gym. One was younger, maybe mid-40s, lean and steady with graying hair at his temples, his face unreadable. The other was older, heavier, his face flushed red as he gestured wildly, his voice cracking from the strain. Even from a distance, you could feel it, a charged electricity hanging in the humid afternoon air. The kind of thing that makes people hold their breath without realizing it. Nobody knew what it was about yet. They didn't know that the man standing so still, saying almost nothing, wasn't just a father confronting a neighbor. They didn't know he was someone whose training had taught him to recognize a predator. The second one stepped out of the shadows. Someone for whom the most dangerous weapon was a mind that stayed perfectly calm while the world spun out of control around him. 3 weeks before that day, my family and I had just finished unpacking the last of the moving boxes in our new home on Maple Street. The place had everything we'd wanted: wide streets, trimmed lawns, friendly neighbors waving from their driveways. It was the kind of neighborhood where people left porch lights on for one another and gathered for block parties in the summer. My 16-year-old daughter, Emma, had already picked out her favorite evening running route, weaving through the streets. And my wife, Sarah, was excited about the community book club she'd heard about from the neighbor across the street. We'd moved here for the safe schools and quiet streets, for the kind of life you're supposed to be able to trust. The day after we arrived, a thick welcome packet landed on our doorstep, courtesy of the Homeowners Association. It came complete with a 40-page rule book and a cheery note from Karen Hutchinson, the HOA president. Her photo was in there too, alongside her husband, Rick, who was listed as the community liaison. Together, they looked like the picture-perfect suburban power couple. Karen's wide, politician smile and Rick's easy confidence made it seem like they belonged at the center of this idyllic little world. It wasn't long before Emma first mentioned Rick. She'd been out running her usual evening loop and came home mentioning a man who always seemed to be out working in his yard when she passed by. Rick Hutchinson lived in the biggest house on the corner of Maple and Oak, freshly mulched flower beds, a wraparound porch, and one of those American flags always hanging just so. At first, it seemed harmless enough. He'd wave, call out a comment about her pace or how strong she looked, just neighborly, right? But over the next several days, his comments turned more personal. He started complimenting her running outfits, calling her a natural athlete, and once even jogged alongside her for half a block, asking invasive questions about her training routine. Emma came home uneasy after that one. When she told us, Sarah and I exchanged a look every parent knows, the one that says, "This isn't nothing." The next day, we decided to handle it politely but firmly. Sarah approached Karen Hutchinson while they were both at the local coffee shop, figuring a woman-to-woman conversation might go smoother. She calmly explained that while we appreciated Rick's friendliness, his attention toward our daughter was making her uncomfortable, and it would be best if he kept his distance. Karen's reaction was unsettling. She laughed it off, like it was some silly misunderstanding. "Oh, Rick's just being welcoming," she insisted, adding that he'd helped train several young runners in the neighborhood. She implied maybe Emma was just a bit shy about accepting guidance from someone with experience. When Sarah pressed the issue and asked that Rick stick to a simple wave and leave it at that, Karen's tone shifted. The warmth drained from her voice, replaced by something cold and brittle. She reminded us, pointedly, that Rick was the community liaison and that part of his role was knowing the running routes of young people in the neighborhood, for safety reasons. She ended the conversation by suggesting that if Emma felt uncomfortable, maybe she should find another place to run. That weekend, things escalated. Emma had been out on her usual Saturday morning run when she noticed Rick's car trailing her, moving slowly a few car lengths behind. She told us later how she tried to brush it off, telling herself she was being paranoid. But when she stopped at a corner to stretch, Rick pulled up, rolled down his window, and told her she looked tired, that it wasn't safe for young girls to be out alone, and offered her a ride home. She declined, forcing a polite smile, and jogged straight home, her heart pounding the whole way. When she told me what happened, a cold, familiar weight settled in my stomach. In my 2 decades of military service, I'd been trained to spot predatory patterns. This was textbook, the friendly approach, boundary testing, isolating tactics, and now the follow. I started digging. What I uncovered made my blood run cold. 2 previous addresses in other states, both in neighborhoods where Rick had served on HOA boards or community organizations. In both cases, his family left suddenly after what local reports called unfounded complaints from parents about inappropriate behavior toward minors. No charges filed, no official record, but a pattern you'd have to be blind not to see. Worse still, it became clear Karen wasn't just his wife, she was his enabler, using her position to smooth over complaints, dismiss concerns, and intimidate families into silence. The turning point came the following Tuesday. Emma was walking home from school and decided to take a shortcut through the neighborhood park. Broad daylight, other families around, she thought she'd be fine. Rick appeared out of nowhere near the playground, approaching her by the fence where it was harder for others to see. According to Mrs. Chen, a neighbor from 2 streets over who happened to be there with her grandson, Rick cornered Emma, asking increasingly personal questions about her running habits, her daily schedule, and whether she wanted private coaching sessions. When Emma tried to leave, he stepped closer, blocking her path. Mrs. Chen, bless her, didn't hesitate. She called me immediately. Her voice was shaking as she described what she was seeing. I was halfway through a hardware store when my phone rang. The moment she spoke, my mind flipped into what we used to call tactical mode, where emotion shuts off and the world narrows down to decisions and movement. I was in my truck and headed to that park in under 3 minutes. I arrived to find Rick still too close to Emma, his body language all wrong, looming in a way designed to intimidate. Emma, to her credit, was doing exactly what I'd taught her, back to the fence, eyes scanning for exits, keeping him talking but not engaging. A handful of parents had started to gather, sensing something wasn't right but unsure what to do. I moved fast, crossing the grass with deliberate, measured steps. Rick didn't notice me until I was 10 feet away. When he did, something in his face changed. Predators like him, they can sense when they've lost control of a situation. It might have been the way I carried myself, or maybe just the look in my eyes. I spoke quietly, no need to shout, told him to back away from my daughter, informed him his behavior constituted harassment of a minor, and that witnesses were present. Rick tried to bluster, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that he was just being neighborly. That's when I told him exactly what I'd found out, the previous addresses, the pattern, the complaints, Karen's role in covering for him. I made it clear, without raising my voice, without threatening a thing, that this was over. That harassment of a minor was a federal crime, and I had contacts who specialized in handling people like him. I pointed out that Mrs. Chen had already documented everything. His transformation was immediate. The aggressive posturing crumbled, his hands started to shake. He kept glancing around for an exit, sweat popping on his forehead despite the cool air. Word had spread through the gathering crowd. Someone recognized me from the base. Within minutes, the entire park knew Rick had picked the wrong family to target. He made one last desperate attempt, raising his voice to accuse me of threatening him, claiming he'd call the police. The absurdity of it broke whatever restraint the crowd had been holding on to. People laughed. It was too obvious, I hadn't raised my voice once, hadn't taken a threatening step. Mrs. Chen spoke up, declaring loudly that she'd seen everything and had already called the authorities. 2 other parents stepped forward, too, confirming they'd seen similar things but hadn't known how to act. An hour later, Karen arrived, trying to regain control the way she always had, barking orders, invoking HOA authority, demanding people disperse. But too many people had seen too much. This time, her usual tactics failed. My presence and the sheer number of witnesses had cracked the facade wide open. Within 48 hours, the HOA called an emergency meeting. Karen was voted out by a landslide. The investigation uncovered a string of suppressed complaints she'd buried. Rick was charged with harassment of a minor, sentenced to 2 years probation, and banned from any contact with minors in the community. The legal fallout and civil lawsuits bankrupted their household in under 6 months. When the judge read the sentence, Karen's face went sheet white. She collapsed into her chair, finally understanding the things she'd enabled had destroyed everything they'd built. They sold their house shortly after, and Maple Street, our neighborhood, became a little quieter and a lot safer. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe in protecting our families, holding predators accountable, and making sure no one gets to hide behind a smile and a title, then hit that subscribe button. This isn't the last story we're telling, and it might just be the one that helps someone in your community. Stay aware, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next.